Hello everyone. In this next Adronis downloads from Sirius video, Adronis is going to come through and he's going to be sharing his particular perspective relating to the history of Mars and looking into the mysterious red planet, finding out from his perspective what the Martian civilization was all about, how it reached its downfall, and what was kind of happening in between those particular times. So again, Adronis is going to come through and we'll get started in finding out more about a perspective of Mars. Here we go. We are here at this time, and we bid you greetings and thank you very much for the opportunity of this interaction today. I am Adronis from Sirius, sending love, appreciation, and gratitude to all who are tuning in to this particular broadcast being brought forward through your internet collective consciousness. We have been shared by the conduit to give our particular perspective relating to the planet within your star system that you would know as Mars. Please understand that everything that we will share in regards to this perspective is simply that of our point of view. For once again, all knowledge, all information, all creation itself resides within your very heart, being, and soul. And this is just one particular perspective from us. Mars itself would be what you would consider to be a twin planet, very much similar to what you knew as your Earth. It started off in very similar capacity, relating to, shall we say, other particular experiments that were conducted by beings very similar to those who, in that sense, helped to seed humanity upon Earth. These particular forms of first degrees of life that took place upon Mars started off in regards to what you would know as a primate form. That many of the early indigenous cultures that took place upon the planet Mars were that of, shall we say, heavy primate energy. Very similar to what you would understand as in association to your Sasquatch, to your Bigfoot. These were the beings that in that sense worked together in regards to many different, shall we say, communities, colonies, continents, as it were, and basically working towards creating a beautiful equilibrium with the planet. That they surrounded themselves with other particular second density life forms in regards to that point of establishment. You had other particular marine life that existed on Mars, very similar to what exists on Earth now. From your dolphins, from your sharks, from your whales, fish, jellyfish, other particular forms of, shall we say, coral-based life, from the oceans of Mars that were very rich in regards to the abundance of life that took place there. Mars herself was meant to function again as this continuing experiment, as, shall we say, growth and expression and love being brought forward from the original creators were to be placed upon this world. That through the earlier times in regards to Mars's forms of endeavors, forms of sharing, a particular cultivation was being taken place in regards to, shall we say, the earlier indigenous primate life that took place upon that planet. These particular life forms themselves were, shall we say, taken by other particular beings, again similar to that of which you would know as the original creators of your planet Earth. And they themselves became a hybridization experiment of other life that came upon Mars. And that their particular physique and that their particular likeness was somewhat like yours, although, shall we say, somewhat different in appearance in regards to smoother faces, shall we say, somewhat elongated bodies, but again, still somewhat humanoid. Skin very similar to what you would know as your indigenous, aboriginal, and Asian energies. And that these particular beings, once hybridized, once created, allowed certain colonies contained within their own appropriation based upon what they were acclimatized to functioning within specific climatic zones upon your planet, were flourishing. And you had approximately, shall we say, 3 different sub-races upon that time in regards to what you would know as humanoid. There were, again, also other similar second density creatures in mammal form, in reptilian form, in amphibious form, in bird form, in insectoid form. All parts of, in that sense, particular, similar, gradual concepts pertaining to what Mars required in regards to her natural equilibrium of, shall we say, planetary life. Very similar to planet Earth. In fact, approximately 70 to 80% of the life that you currently have on Earth was once on Mars. This also includes the life existing, that of what you would commonly understand as your dinosaurs. These particular beings themselves once walked upon Mars, and you can actually find many different fossils pertaining to such beings, altered slightly different in regards to, shall we say, atmospheric conditioning. Very similar to that degree, buried deep within the sands of Mars. As time progressed, more of these civilizations began to function and flourish very similar to your own ages of what you had upon your planet. From what you would know as Neolithic orders, from what you would know as, shall we say, Bronze orders, Iron orders, all these other particular orders and ages that you would be somewhat familiar with, as well as your own Renaissance, as well as what you would know as your industrial ages. These all took place. They also started to move into a great state of advancement in regards to their golden eras. That their golden eras were highly technological. And that over time, approximately 3 of these particular sub-races were beginning to flourish very strongly in cooperation and in unification to actually help each other in bringing forward technology that would actually help them to explore the stars. The whole idea of the quarantine policy of what you would understand of what's taking place upon your Earth now was nowhere, shall we say, as strict as what you are going through upon Earth as it was upon Mars at that time. It was very lenient. And so it was very much possible for many of these particular unified sub-races of humanoid beings to explore the stars, to explore their own star system. And that through the exploration of their very own star system, encountered other particular beings that gained some form of interest in regards to their thriving society. For their ability in their own golden age was very similar to the higher technological ability that you humans have in regards to your own era relating to that of Atlantis. That Atlantis itself was, shall we say, spacefaring in regards to its technology. Its golden age simply allowed, shall we say, high degrees of technology to not only explore other areas of your planet, but to also, shall we say, become interstellar. This was also so in regards to Mars. Other particular beings that were discovering some of the races, or shall we say, groups of the sub-races, noticed that Mars itself was thriving, and that it was indeed a beautiful world. It had a great deal of resources upon its surface. These particular beings that emerged from Orion, that were once a part of, shall we say, particular interventions of Maldek, then found their way upon Mars and began to indoctrinate themselves into the Martian society. These beings are what you would refer to as the Aryans, or the Caucasian races. And that they themselves decided to come upon Mars and share in the wealth of the world of a unified based society. This eventually, just like your own Atlantis, began to turn itself over into turmoil. And that there was now the point of greed that was seen as Mars was again a very resourceful planet, was very thriving in nature, thriving in agriculture, had in that sense just as much rich ores upon its surface as your Earth does now. And so they potentially saw the planet as something that could be harvested. They potentially saw, shall we say, a naive-based unified culture that really did not understand the ways of trickery, the ways of dominance. And so this particular civilization, in regards to the three sub-races whom we have spoken of, became heavily dominated by these particular beings. A deception took place. And that the technology itself, from what was originally created by the unified beings upon the world, became taken over or destroyed. And that the technology that existed from the new owners of Mars was now within their own possession. This is what created, again, another particular takeover, very similar to what occurred upon Maldek, that is now, shall we say, the asteroid belt contained within your star system, that was originally the fifth planet. Through beings such as this, came upon the world and in that sense, shall we say, claimed it as their own state of territory and basically engulfed the planet in war. The exact same thing happened to Mars. They were able to claim the planet as their own, and an internal war took place. That many of the beings who were highly unified were now starting to rebel. And particular, shall we say, civilizations, colonies, or territories as it were very much opposed to many of the new owners that came upon the world of Mars. And a very large worldwide conflict took place. It was not uncommon for many of these particular beings that now occupied Mars to have, shall we say, adversaries in other places. And because of this very thriving war, others who were aware of these particular beings that now, shall we say, claimed themselves to have ownership of Mars, found that Mars itself was now becoming a battleground. The experiment of Mars became so out of control that the planet itself was basically obliterated based upon the attempt of preventing Mars itself from, shall we say, conquering all other planets within the star system. In order to prevent this, a celestial object that was brought forward from the original asteroid belt that was once Maldek was, in that sense, slung from the asteroid belt and projected itself towards Mars. This literally created a cataclysm that, particularly in its devastation, annihilated 90 to 95% of all life upon the planet. There were those who foresaw, shall we say, such danger occurring upon Mars and decided to migrate. Some of them were able to migrate to Venus. Others were able to migrate to Earth. Many of the, shall we say, beings that were responsible for many of these takeovers decided to migrate to Earth. And this became the beginning of, shall we say, the Martian conflict that then eventually took itself over upon your planet. As the Confederation of Planets, who were primarily responsible for the safeguarding and caretaking of this star system at the time, did not want to lose an immense amount of life. A handful that represented the backup of many of these races were placed upon Earth. Firstly, particular beings that were directly seeded from the star of what you would know as Arcturus, that were contained upon Mars, were firstly brought to commingle with much of what was happening upon the Earth at that time in regards to colonies, territories, and establishments. Later on, these particular beings that represented the, shall we say, alliances of domination, these particular councils did not want to see them destroyed either in regards for preservation of life, and were therefore taking off the planet of Mars, utilized through what you would know as a Merkabah vessel, very similar to a teleporter or a materializer, and basically placed upon Earth in the hopes that this particular culture would be able to commingle, to work together in association and with peace. That they themselves had promised, if you save us, we will work together with Earth. We will bring things together. Please, we will turn ourselves around. In their own naivety, the Confederation of Planets believed them. And this is exactly why, shall we say, the backup, the handful of life that was contained upon Mars, was placed upon Earth. And that 3 particular sub-races were originally from Mars that were placed upon, shall we say, Earth. The first sub-race is what you would know as the Proto-Neanderthalic, or the primate of what you would know as Bigfoot or Sasquatch, that was placed from Mars onto Earth. The second particular race are, shall we say, the direct seeded energies that were brought forward from Mars onto Earth, that you would consider very similar to be your Mediterranean folk, as well as, shall we say, mixtures of those particular beings that reside within your Jewish nation. Thirdly were the idea in regards to the beings that you would refer to as the Caucasian, that then later on came upon Earth before the destruction of Mars. Mars's destruction related into a cataclysmic pole shift that was triggered in regards to such an immense, intense explosion that just as a minimal understanding and calculation represented the extension of nearly 1,000 of your atomic bombs detonating at the same time. Mars itself was completely destroyed in regards to a majority of life that once existed upon its surface. It is now in a state of immense quarantine, that the only sufficient state of life that is occurring upon Mars right now is what exists within the subterranes of the planet. It is highly unlikely, in regards to its current state, that a thriving populace of approximately 1 million or more can actually exist upon Mars's surface. It simply does not have the natural ability of sustaining life at this time without an immense amount of intervention taking place on a highly technological level to reproduce and recreate much of the original flora and fauna that once took place upon its land. In order for any particular form of colony to survive on the surface, would require a great amount of migration from other agricultural aspects from other worlds, such as your Earth, in order to create particular sustainable colonies. This is basically where Mars is. However, there is a particular outreach program taking place that is stationed deep within the underground caverns of Mars, and that eventually there will be human beings coming upon Mars that may have the opportunity to encounter these beings that are working together in, shall we say, creating a unification between humanity and between themselves that will then create a relief effort, shall we say, to bring Mars back into full sustainment of its natural state. This, however, is a great deal of time down the road. There must be the understanding first that there is, shall we say, a level of maturity in understanding from those particular colonists that are scheduled to go to Mars to actually realize that the planet itself is being shared by other contacts, other beings existing within the subterranes of the planet. We have the idea that Mars itself will, within the next 100 to 200 years, begin these phases of reintegration, of re-implementing the necessary flora and fauna in regards to extraterrestrial intervention alongside your people in unification. This holds a momentum for many of the population that exists upon your world now to eventually at some point colonize Mars without such an immense effort of, shall we say, endangerment. So this is a possibility that will exist down the road, again depending upon the understanding of maturity in regards to its cycles, in regards to its momentum, and in regards to its motivation to bring forward this particular planet to once again establish the necessary flora and fauna so that you all are able to see just how beautiful originally a planet like Mars was. Mars itself, right now, exists as that of what you would know as a third to fourth density planet as well. It is literally going through a very similar shift from what your planet is going through. And it is of no consequence that other planets within your star system are moving up the ladder of different densities in regards to their own nature, in regards to their own way, in regards to their own equilibrium of energies. But Mars itself is moving into that third to fourth density bridge as you are now upon planet Earth. And that there is the possibility, the momentum of energies within this time ahead for you to share the twin worlds of Earth and Mars, or even as we will put it, the triplet worlds from what you would know as Mars, Earth, and Venus, to actually work together and seeing how the unity of Venus, of Earth, and of Mars are very much similar. Earth, again, representing the energies most compliant to the experiment that is happening in regards to humanity's growth, as well as your own intention to move back into a unified consciousness that does have the ability to extend onto Mars in the, shall we say, most recent point of your timelines ahead, that will eventually start to move to Venus as well. But again, Venus is a whole different tale within itself. So we thank you very much for the opportunity of this interaction. We have only just scratched the surface of Mars, but we want to give you something to ponder upon in regards to everything that we have shared, for there is much more to talk about with Mars, for there is much more for you to self-discover in regards to the foundations that we have laid out only from our perspective. There is no doubt other perspectives will come, but this is simply one perspective from a Sirius point of view. I am Adronis from Sirius. Thank you very much. Farewell for this timing, and we now return to the conduit. Goodbye for now. All right. Thank you very much. Take care, and feel free to check out consciousmatrix.com for more videos, private sessions, products, training, and a lot more. consciousmatrix.com. Thank you very much. I'm Brad Johnson, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Namaste, and may it be well with you. Goodbye for now.